My husband had been reborn. The very first thing he did upon returning to life was rush to save Leora, abandoning me under the beam it had fallen on me. In the previous life, Leora had been burned alive in the study. When the flood swept through the house, no one knew she was trapped inside. Watching my husband run off, a strange sense of relief washed over me. This time, I no longer had to bear the crushing weight of a life debt, no longer had to toil for the Theodore family like a beast of burden. 10 years of marriage to Theodore. And no matter how cold or harsh he was to me, I had always strived to fulfill my duties as a wife. Why? Because he had saved my life. It happened during a visit to a friend's house. Her youngest brother was celebrating his first birthday, and relatives and friends had gathered for the occasion. Unexpectedly, a fire broke out. The blaze was fierce, quickly engulfing the entire estate. The female guests were trapped in the West Hall. Worse, a ceiling beam, scorched by the flames, fell directly onto my right leg. I couldn't free myself. Watching the other women panic and flee, I thought this was where my life would end. Then Theodore burst in, lifting the beam himself and pulling me to safety. From that moment, everyone said my second life had been given to me by Theodore. He had risked his own life to save mine. Out of gratitude, I chose to marry him. It became a celebrated story. Back then, the Graceful Xianxia. I only knew that a woman named Leora had died in the fire. She was a concubine's daughter. Unremarkable. And most of the guests that day hardly remembered her existence. Only when her matron counted heads in a panic did they realize she was missing. Her remains were found in the study, reduced to nothing but a few scorched bronze bookshelves. The jade pendant and gold ornaments on the corpse confirmed her identity. It wasn't until after I married that I learned Theodore had a past with Leora. He had always wanted to marry her, but her status was insufficient to match Theodore's. And his family disapproved. They arranged that once Theodore took a primary wife, Leora could be brought in as a noble concubine, a way to honor their love. Yet, what was meant to unite lovers forever ended with them separated by life and death. After marrying, Theodore often brooded over this loss, sinking into melancholy for a long while. Even the Theodore family elders, who had once looked down on Leora's origins, began to praise her virtues. Living people can rarely outshine the dead. Moreover, the beam had left a permanent scar on my leg. The Theodore family considered it merciful enough that Theodore had married me despite this flaw, especially since my life had been saved by him. I accepted this, and endured every hardship the family imposed, believing it was my duty to repay my debt. Later, Theodore posthumously honored Leora with a memorial as a secondary wife. He told me to live well, to live on Leora's behalf, that my life had been exchanged for hers. If I lived poorly, the one I would wrong the most would be Leora. I rejected this notion. My only lifesaver was Theodore. Leora had no connection to me. She neither died because of me or to save me. Theodore's career flourished. Yet he remained unhappy, at least when with me, always lost in memories of Leora. So, I mirrored Leora's appearance and temperament in several concubines I brought into his household. I treated them well, for both Theodore's affection and my own appreciation. Eventually, having fulfilled my obsession, these concubines bore children. I recorded them under my own name in the family registry, making them legitimateurs. One day, another concubine went into labor. Theodore and I rushed through the rain to check on her. At the water pavilion in the rear garden, we met. The rain intensified. I slipped and instinctively grabbed Theodore. Neither of us could regain our footing, and we tumbled down a slope together, plunging into the lake. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn 10 years earlier. Precisely at the time of that fire. Theodore, heedless of everything, ran past the doorway toward the study without looking back. I exhaled softly, a weight lifting from my entire body. I pushed the beam off me and crawled with all my strength toward the exit. When I finally emerged and was pulled to safety, I realized something astonishing. I could survive Eden without Theodore's rescue. And now Theodore could finally amend a regret of his past saving Leora. This regained life felt all the more precious. Theodore even brought Leora back to the Theodore estate to recover and insisted, with unwavering determination, that he would marry her. Everyone knew of Theodore and Lyra's secret bond. Some praised them for defying social norms in the name of love. Others condemned them for shamelessly pursuing each other. And many envied Leora, lowly born, for capturing the attention of Theodore, the family's legitimate heir. None of it concerned me. I cradled a steaming bowl of Angelica chicken soup, sipping it with satisfaction. Since Rebirth, I had eaten 18 chickens roasted, stewed, kaitautalosai, braised, spiced, never missing a single meal. In my previous life, married 10 years into the Theodore family, I had never tasted chicken once because Theodore's father disliked it. I had thought this time around, I would have no further entanglements with the Theodore family. Yet, that very day, my mother came rushing to see me, beaming. Alara, do you remember the Theodore family's heir? Theodore? The bowl in my hands nearly slipped and shattered. I don't remember, I said evenly, steadying myself. How could you forget? Last year, during the plum blossom viewing, Madame Chen, whether intentionally or not, tried to probe me about arranging a marriage for Theodore's heir. Wait, there was such a thing? I genuinely had no idea. Every winter in the capital, several plum blossom appreciation gatherings were held. In truth, the so-called appreciation was merely a pretext for bringing together young men and women of suitable age, giving them a chance to see and be seen. I rarely attended such events, so I honestly had no idea what stories the plum gardens held. Sigh. Back then, I actually had my eyes on young Master Theodore. One of the ladies said, we plan to exchange our birth papers after the new year and match our 8 characters. Everything was settled until, out of nowhere, the Theodore family fell silent. My heart stirred violently. So even if Theodore hadn't saved me, his family had already intended to propose to the Alara family? But Theodore had insisted on marrying Leora. His family elders couldn't dissuade him, and the proposal was delayed. Eventually, they reached a compromise. Theodore would marry a proper wife first, and then bring Leora into the house as his concubine. I set down my soup spoon. Perhaps the Theodore family simply thought they weren't worthy of the Alaras and gave up the idea. Although the Theodores were a family of noble lineage, they had begun to decline in Theodore's father's generation. My Alara family, on the other hand, was flourishing. Many of my uncles and cousins held government posts, and my father had already risen to the position of vice minister of personnel. But mother's face darkened. Alara, when did you become so sharp-tongued and shallow? The second master of the Theodore family was a general who defended the frontier and sacrificed his life for the country. Your silks and fine meals today were bought with his blood. It's not that the Theodores overreached, it's the Alaras who aren't worthy of them. Her eyes turned red as she spoke. Why such agitation? I dared not say another word. After calming herself, she continued, today, heading full wide session, the Theodore family has already sent someone to propose. I've had your birth paper prepared. Once the auspicious date is chosen, we'll match your 8 characters. If all goes well, the engagement will be settled. I spat out a mouthful of tea. Mother, does father know about this? I asked. Her tone was indifferent. He's busy with state affairs. How could he have time for such trivial matters? I was dumbfounded. Since when had my marriage become a trivial matter? In families like ours, one match could shake the entire household. Mother, we should at least inform father first. Besides, rumors are spreading outside. People say that young Master Theodore already has someone he loves and has pledged himself to her. If that's true, what does it mean for him to propose to the Alara family now? Mother dismissed it with a wave. All just idle gossip. Even if it's true, that woman could never be presented in public. The one they intend to make their lawful wife is you. That's why they're here to propose. I truly wanted to pry open mother's head to see what was inside. In my past life, Theodore had indeed saved me. Father had only wanted to express gratitude, perhaps with silver. Perhaps by promoting Theodore's career. But mother insisted that I should repay the debt with my life, persuading me over and over that Theodore was handsome, virtuous, and from a refined family, a clan that had produced a loyal general who died for the country. To marry into such a house, she said, was a blessing earned over several lifetimes. I had been young then, Navi and tender-hearted. Of course I was moved. But after marrying into the Theodore family, I discovered he was no true gentleman. I even begged my parents to let me divorce him. To my despair, Mother said coldly, "You were born a Theodore. And you'll die a Theodore. Your very life was saved by him. You'll spend this lifetime repaying that debt." Father was gravely ill by then. I was hopeless and alone. But after 10 years of torment, I was no longer that shy little girl who blushed at every word. I laughed softly. "Mother, you must be joking." Before he even married, Theodore was already busy chasing skirts, causing gossip everywhere. No decent family wanted to give him their daughter. And now his family still has the audacity to propose 2 hours? This is far too amusing. I must tell Father and my uncles. They'll have a good laugh. Still chuckling, I rose and strode out, ignoring Mother's furious stamping behind me. Father wasn't home, so I hid in the bamboo grove to think things through. Theodore had been reborn. He didn't love me then. Why not stop his family from proposing? If he truly loved Leora, he could have spent his life with her quietly. Why couldn't he just leave me be? It was obvious the Theodores still looked down on Leora's humble birth and wanted a high-born wife to bolster their standing. They wanted, once again, to gain Father's support, to rise in officialdom, to have me return to the Theodore family as their obedient drudge. I bit down hard, crushing the silk handkerchief in my fist into shreds. That evening, when Father returned home, I told him everything about the Theodores' proposal. He scolded Mother harshly for acting without sense. Though the Theodores are of noble descent, Theodore himself has achieved nothing and is already the subject of much scandal. How could such a man be called suitable? Alara is right, it's laughable that he'd dare propose. But Mother refused to yield. How is he not suitable? Who hasn't been frivolous in youth? Besides, his uncle died defending the country. Shouldn't we lend some support to such a family? Support? And with what? My marriage? My entire life? Father and I exchanged a helpless look. "You're right," Father said finally. "We can show some favor in court to the Theodore family. But as for Alara's marriage, we'll make other arrangements." That silenced Mother at last. Perhaps because I had been given a second life. Certain things had changed. My right leg, which had been badly burned before, healed completely this time after treatment. No scars at all. Overjoyed, I thanked the physician for his skill. But he gave me a strange look. The burn was quite shallow to begin with. As long as you applied the ointment regularly, it was bound to heal perfectly. Then why, in my previous life, had it scarred so badly? Because of that scar, Theodore despised me and even told his mother about it. Madame Theodore said I was a woman with a fatal flaw. That becoming her son's wife was a stroke of impossible luck, that I didn't deserve him. A suspicion struck me. Under what circumstances? I asked the physician. Would the wound have left a scar? He replied absently while writing out a prescription. Only if someone ignored proper treatment and applied ridiculous folk remedies like ash or groundwood bark. That would certainly scar. Lightning seemed to split through my mind. In my previous life, after Theodore saved me, my mother urged me to repay him with my body while smearing my wound with ash, claiming it was a secret remedy for burns. Later, when the wound stabbed and left a scar, she said a blemish on the body made a woman unfit to marry into a great house. That Theodore's family taking me was already the best match I could hope for. I married Theodore partly out of gratitude for my life, and partly because that scar filled me with shame until I consented to the match. Looking back now, my mother came from a distinguished family. Our household had its own physician. She could not have been ignorant of the uselessness of such folk remedies unless she had decided from the start to marry me off to the Theodores. If so, even if my family outranked them in pedigree, my supposed physical defect would force me to marry down. Why was my mother so obsessed with pushing me into the Theodore household? Even if I suffered within their walls as if living in hell, she forbade me from seeking divorce or returning home. She demanded I devote myself heart and soul to being a Theodore wife. By then I had given up on Theodora and stopped leaning on my natal family. So I began slipping women into Theodore's rooms every few days. Wasn't that what my mother wanted for me, to be a virtuous wife and mother? Those concubines should have been enough to please Theodore. Right? Whether he could restrain himself. Whether he would exhaust his body, those were not things a battered primary wife could control. When my mother found out, she did something she'd never done before. She came to me only not to comfort me, but to scold me outright. She called me incompetent, accused me of failing to hold Theodore's heart, and berated me for filling his rooms with concubines. For not preserving a one man for a lifetime fidelity. She berated me as if I had betrayed her, hurling such venom that I felt drenched in shame. I thought her unreasonable and rolled my eyes at her. Seeing me unresponsive, she said something else, something that felt important, but at the time I was already plotting to find a woman in the pleasure quarter who resembled Leora, preferably with a few sordid vices to match, to bring to Theodore. I can't now recall exactly what my mother said then. Past memories rose up and chilled me to the bone, not the 10 years of hell itself, but the realization that someone so close had been scheming against me. King Ming was approaching, and my mother asked me to accompany her on an excursion to the Ishan. She said a tea house at the mountain's foot made famous green rice cakes. I agreed readily. We chatted and laughed along the way, as if the matchmaking talk with the Theodore family had never occurred. When the carriage reached the mountains base, I suggested stopping at the tea house for their cakes, but my mother hurried me on toward the climb. I felt a cold laugh form in my chest. This trip had a smell of trickery. Because the weather was warm, many came to the mountain that day. We passed several acquaintances, ladies inviting us to join, but my mother politely declined each time. At a fork in the path she pointed to a little used trail and said there was a peach grove over there. The blossoms were at their peak, she said, and breathtaking. Then why do so few people go that way? I asked with a smile. She hesitated. Perhaps many simply don't know about it. I said nothing further and followed her, accompanied by 4 servants' maids, and an elder nurse, 6 of us in total. The path wound deep and secluded. My mother's face grew nervous. I remained outwardly calm. Suddenly, 2 masked men armed with daggers leapt from the brush and blocked our way. "Don't move, this is a robbery." The bandits seemed flustered, their words trembling. I curled my lips into a cold smile. "Are you after money, honor, or lives?" My fearless demeanor unsettled them. One of the men pointed his blade at me. "Behave, or we'll take your life." My mother flung herself over me, begging in a shrill voice, "Spare my daughter's life. She's only 16. If anything happens to her, I'll die." Before she finished, a boy snarled from the side, "Bold thieves daring to snatch a woman in broad daylight." The figure with a sword stepped out. I fixed my gaze on him. It wasn't Theodore or anyone I cared for. He glanced back at me. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." At the sight of him I felt a wave of nausea rise, my stomach turned, and I retched. My mother thought I was frightened, and patted my back. "Don't be afraid. It's Master Theodore, he's come to save us." I brushed her hand aside and called loudly to the rear. "Come out, seize the thieves. Double the bounty for capture and 10 taels of silver for each man." No sooner had I spoken than 10 burly carriers I had hired earlier crept out and swarmed forward, overpowering the 2 would-be robbers. I pointed at Theodore. "And him, he's part of the gang." Before he could react, Theodore was bound and gagged. My mother gaped, stunned, then stammered, "This? What is happening? Who are these men?" They were the porters I'd hired at the mountain's base, strong, respectable men from nearby villages. I'd told them I planned to climb and feared snakes and vermin, so I'd paid them to trail us at a distance so as not to disturb my mother's outing. These were people whose families lived nearby. They were known and could be trusted, not likely to turn traitor, and the price was fair. I had expected nothing more than an annoyance of snakes and insects. Instead, actual brigands had appeared, and I felt as if I had gained a profit. "Take them all to the magistrate," I said coldly. My mother suddenly panicked. "No, don't. Sending them to court will ruin your reputation." "Mother, rest assured," I replied. "More than 10 people can testify that these ruffians never came near me or assaulted me. How could my reputation be harmed?" Hearing me, the porters eagerly vouched for me in chorus. "Miss, rest assured we'll testify for you." "No. No," my mother rushed forward to stop them, terrified at the thought of a public trial. "If this goes to the courts, people will gossip. And even your father could be implicated." I pretended to consider her words. I had never intended to truly press charges. If the mastermind behind it were uncovered, it would make my Alara household the talk of the capital. But letting them go would be too lenient. I said, my eyes sharpening. Give them a lesson, beat them badly. Break their hands and feet so they can never do evil again. My mother's face slackened with relief, then drained white. A lesson is fine. But breaking limbs, no. That's too much. After all, they didn't really harm us. Theodore, still bound, struggled and yelled. Alara. It's me, Theodore. I shot him a sideways glance. What, Theodore? Beat them to death. Fists rose like a tide and rained down on the three men. Listening to their cries, a guilty joy spread through me. Back at the mansion, I even found myself whistling. Mother, however, claimed she had caught a chill and stayed in bed for several days. She refused my care and even declined formal visits, insisting on rest. In truth, she simply did not want to see me. Perfect. I took the opportunity to deliver a formal visiting card to my friend Sylvia. Her family had temporarily moved to the Western Garden after the recent flood incident, only returning a couple of days ago, once their house had been repaired. Since they were back, I intended to pay a proper visit. In my previous life, I never had the chance to see her again. Shortly after I married into the Theodore family, she and her parents were dispatched to the western regions, severing all contact with me. Alara, I truly apologize for frightening you last time, Sylvia said, guilt written all over her face when she saw me. I shook my head and smiled. No harm done. By the way, have you discovered the cause of the flood this time? Sylvia's expression grew serious as she lowered her voice. After my father investigated, we did find some issues. But since no one was hurt, the matter wasn't pursued further. My interest immediately piqued. Do tell. She explained that when the servants traced the fire's origin, they found lots of wood shavings at the base of the West Hall's outer wall, scattered alongside some charcoal powder. The West Hall had been recently varnished. Before painting, the workers sanded the beams and pillars. So finding wood shavings by the wall doesn't necessarily indicate sabotage. It could have simply been leftover debris that wasn't cleaned up properly. And the charcoal powder? During the celebration of my younger brother's first birthday, several large boxes of firecrackers were prepared. It's possible that the servants accidentally broke some wrappers while fetching them, leaving a trail of powder. Originally, the fire wouldn't have spread so badly. But those few days coincided with an unexpected late cold spell. The varnish on the beams and pillars had sealed them. Yet the paint inside hadn't fully dried, so it ignited instantly. I frowned. So many coincidences? And what about the girl from the Leora family? How did she end up in the study? As I recall, the Leora family held only a minor 7th-rank position and had no ties to your family. They shouldn't have even been invited. I asked. Mrs. Leora came with Beatrice, Sylvia explained. You know, Beatrice is a relative on my sister-in-law's side. Mrs. Leora, through many convoluted connections, sought Beatrice's favor, likely hoping to use the occasion to make connections. As for why the Leora girl went to the study alone, we don't know. We intended to ask her directly, but after she was rescued by young Master Theodore, she remained with the Theodore family and couldn't be reached even by her own relatives. Sylvia sighed. Honestly, hadn't the Theodore family is so careless. If it were any other noble household, their reckless actions would have earned them a serious lesson. That the Leora family was obscure and eager to attach themselves to the powerful made this misstep passable. I, however, silently repeated one name in my mind, Beatrice. I remembered that in my previous life, Beatrice had come to help me with my bridal makeup. It was then that I learned she had been my mother's close friend in her youth. Having followed her husband to his post years ago, she had only recently returned to the capital and resumed contact with my mother. Connections between noble women in the capital were common. But the way she linked my mother to the Leora family through all these trusts was peculiar. After bidding Sylvia farewell, I reminded her to keep in touch, even if she went to the western regions. Sylvia laughed. My father just finalized this assignment today. And you've already got unwind of it, you really have ears everywhere. I smiled and waved it off. Just as I lifted my foot to leave, Sylvia called out again. By the way, the Mabel your mother recommended was truly excellent. She saved us considerable face at the banquet. My mother has been insisting on visiting your mother to express her thanks. A chill ran through me. You mean Mabel, the one whose ancestors worked in the imperial kitchens? Sylvia smiled. Exactly her. It was her. Mabel had originally been a cook in my maternal grandfather's household. When my grandparents moved to the old capital, Mabel stayed behind, managing the preparations for all our family banquets. In my previous life, when I married into the Theodore family, Mother worried I might not manage the household properly, so she specifically had Mabel teach me. She insisted I do everything myself, even down to washing my hands and preparing meals. Only then would I be a proper wife. Yet my mother, in this life, had never so much as cooked a single bowl of soup for my father. In the carriage, I closed my eyes and tapped my thighs. Fragments of thoughts flashing through my mind, seemingly disconnected, yet strangely interwoven. Something important had clearly been overlooked. I racked my memory when the carriage came to a sudden halt. What's going on? I asked, sending a maid to investigate. The maid returned. Young Master Theodore has stopped the carriage. He says he has something to say to you, miss. My face turned icy. Hadn't he already been punished enough? That day, the porters had spared them just enough not to break his limbs. I had no intention of seeing Theodore, but I knew that if he blocked the carriage in public, rumors would spread. Reluctantly, I got down. His face bore remnants of color from the previous encounter. As I stepped off, he stood haughtily and said, Alara, how long do you intend to keep this up? If you continue, I won't marry you. I furrowed my brows. The man's audacity knew no bounds. What kind of madness is this? Theodore? Coming to me in public, spouting nonsense. You marry me? You dare? Does your family have no sense of proportion? No idea of their own weight? Theodore looked at me, incredulous. Then his expression darkened. Are you sulking at me? Angry that I brought Leora into the Theodore household? Rest assured the position of legitimate wife is still yours. The Theodore family will never deny you the respect you deserve. I shook my head. He was beyond reason. Theodore, today you arbitrarily blocked my carriage and insulted my honor with vile words. When I return, I will have my father, uncles, brothers, and the entire Alara clan unite to censure the Theodore family. Just you wait. With that, I turned and returned to the carriage without looking back, leaving Theodore standing there, bewildered. You weren't like this before, he muttered. Before, in the first years of my marriage to the Theodore family, I observed propriety, honored my in-laws, and worked wholeheartedly. Even though Theodore treated me with icy indifference, I poured my heart into every task, out of gratitude for his life-saving deed. Father had even supported Theodore's meteoric rise. But after father fell ill and retired, the Theodore family escalated their cruelty toward me. On snowy days, paying respects to Theodore's parents could take several hours. This was routine. There were countless occasions in the dead of winter when Theodore demanded fresh fish, and I had to break the ice and fetch them from the river. Theodore's mother, sensitive to the cold and claiming the warming pot was too hot and awkward, would have me warm my hands over it and then use my heated hands to warm her feet. Hands covered in frostbite pressed against scorching metal burning. Itching, heading fulfilled. Unbearable, but I endured it year after year. Theodore's father liked the glutinous rice balls I fried by hand. Each had to burst just right. I fried more than a dozen at a time, the hot oil spattering across my face and hands. Yet Theodore's father never truly ate them. At most he'd take a bite. The rest fed to the dogs. At every meal, I had to stand aside and serve the entire household before I could eat, watching me nibble on leftovers. Theodore's mother would smile. You were lucky. If Theodore hadn't saved your life back then, you wouldn't even have scraps to eat. I choked on the words. In the 5th year of our marriage, my father passed away, and I returned home alone for the funeral. I wept endlessly. My mother, however, still urged me, go back soon. Theodore is waiting at home. You must treat him and his family well to repay his life-saving act. Through my tears, I asked, A life-saving act. Again and again, what if I don't repay it? She snapped. Then you'll go to hell. Hell. She said. That was it. Suddenly, I stopped crying and wiped my tears away. From then on, I ceaselessly brought concubines to Theodore. When he faltered, I even procured secret remedies for him, all bought from foreign merchants. Theodore's mother, sensitive to cold, was pampered with the freshest crabs, their hearts finely minced and mixed into her daily bird's nest, all at my personal expense. Theodore's father insisted on fried rice balls. I improved the recipe with lard, sugar, and sesame, making them irresistibly sweet, and he demanded several each day. I learned dishes like crystal pork knuckles, dong po pork, and braised pork with preserved vegetables from Mabel, serving a different specialty daily. By the time I was reborn, Theodore was all show with no substance. His mother's heart palpitations worsened. She had severe asthma, and even walking left her gasping. Theodore's father already showed signs of impending stroke-slurred speech. Vacant expression. Though I secretly used contraceptive tonics, many children were still registered under my name. Once Theodore and his parents passed, I could have firmly assumed my position as headmistress of the Alara household. But fate had other plans. I didn't live to see that day. I was reborn instead. So what's different now? I was never a kind-hearted woman. I am someone who deserves hell. Returning home, I acted decisively. I summoned my father, uncles, having frères, and older brothers, recounting Theodore's misdeeds and asking them to intervene on my behalf. They were furious. Theodore comes from a noble family yet is so undisciplined, no wonder the Theodore family is declining. This is outrageous. Such insolence toward our sister. And yet the world may speak of him without harm, while our sister's reputation suffers. How detestable. Tomorrow at court, I will formally report the Theodore family. No one blamed me. Instead, they all rallied to restore my justice. Having family protect me felt indescribably comforting. In my past life, I had tried to seek their help, only to be blocked by my mother, who scolded me for making a scene, worried about petty conflicts disrupting both families. Without my natal family's backing, the Theodore household increasingly disrespected me. I had thought my family abandoned me entirely, assuming I married Theodore to repay his life-saving, and that all my grievances were my lot alone. Now I see that idea belonged only to my mother. That evening, my mother stormed in. Furious, striking me across the face before I could speak. Alara, how I love you. You dare incite the family to impeach the Theodore household at court. What is your heart made of? How could I have such a daughter? If you have any conscience left, go with me at once, and tell your father it was your deep affection for Theodore. His indifference provoked your anger, and you falsely accused him. I touched my throbbing face and felt something snap, perhaps the last thread of our mother-daughter bond. Looking into her furious eyes, I said calmly, "Very well, Mother. I will explain everything to Father." Her anger eased slightly. Seeing my reddened face, she looked uneasy. "Alara, I shouldn't have hit you, but you truly overstepped. Remember, everything I do is for your own good. If you upset the Theodore heir, or offend the family, how will your married life ever be peaceful?" I didn't argue. Coldly, I replied, "Understood." Once she left satisfied, I went to my father's study and spoke with him at length. The next day passed quietly. The day after, nothing happened. In the following days, my mother saw everything returning to normal and finally relaxed. A few days later, the person she had stationed to watch me reported that she had gone to the Kuishing Tower. I followed immediately. Kuishing Tower was her property. Somewhat secluded. The first floor was the main hall. The second floor had private rooms. And the third floor was off-limits to outsiders, reserved for entertaining business partners. At the entrance, I handed a silver ingot to the waiter who had been stationed outside. "How long have you been in?" I asked. The waiter, having fulfilled waiver, leading me discreetly to a side door, replied, "Just arrived. We received word the third floor has been cleared, so I immediately came to inform you." "Miss." I nodded. Don't let the innkeeper know I was here. When I reached the third floor and had just sat down, a quarrel erupted from the next private room. What do you mean by this? You talk about heroism and saving beauties. Have my Theodore standing guard. And then let someone beat him until his face is bruised. I narrowed my eyes. That sharp voice, I would recognize it even if it turned to ashes. It was Theodore's mother. A few days ago, your daughter publicly humiliated my Theodore with her words. Who does she think she is? Morgana. If you don't intend for your daughter to marry into our family, don't toy with the Theodore household. There are plenty of girls who would jump at the chance. Faced with her anger, my mother's tone was slightly conciliatory. The incident of Beishun was merely an accident. I didn't know Alara would arrange for people to follow behind. As for her speaking rudely to Theodore, I have already reprimanded her. Rest assured, our Alara will indeed marry into the Theodore family. Theodore's mother was impatient. Why do you complicate things with so many incidents? Fire. Bandits? If you truly wanted your daughter to marry in, wouldn't a marriage contract suffice? Mother sighed. You don't understand. My daughter appears meek on the surface, but deep down she is proud and stubborn. Just like her father. If you approach directly with a proposal, the outcome is uncertain. Even if she marries in, it will be difficult to control. But think, if the Theodore family owes her a favor, things will be different. She won't just be devoted to the Theodore family. My husband will spare no effort supporting his son-in-law. Don't you want Theodore to rise in rank and favor in the future? Theodore's mother was visibly swayed. You have a point. But this has already been messed up. What can we do now? Mother, however, appeared confident. I still have a plan. Next month, during the Dragon Boat Festival, the Empress Dowager will grant medicinal baths to the officials. At that time, I sat expressionless, listening to their scheming until they left. Once alone, I calmly changed my clothes, removed my hair ornaments, and sipped the tea the maid handed me. When she left, the room was silent but for me. I sat straight, my fingers slowly trembling. Then my arms, shoulders, and finally my entire body shook uncontrollably, consumed by fear and rage. How could 16-year-old me have escaped? If I were still the Navi girl from 10 years ago, how could I have evaded one scheme after another? I had thought countless times, if I hadn't gone to that banquet, if not for that fire, I wouldn't have had to marry into the Theodore household. This living hell. I blamed myself for not running fast enough, for not being vigilant, for failing to escape the West Hall in time. I had dreamed countless times of running to that fire, running and laughing if I escaped, crying if I didn't. But it turned out it made no difference. Whether I ran or not, I had always been trapped. Never truly free. The next day, Father had a day off. I approached him. So many things have happened recently. I want to visit my maternal family to clear my mind and see them. My maternal family had moved to the old capital when I was 3. Mother never visited and had little contact, but fortunately Father maintained correspondence with them, keeping our bond intact. Mother immediately objected. The mountains and roads are far. How could a young girl like you manage alone? I took her hand. Then come with me. You haven't seen my grandparents or uncles in years, don't you miss them? Her expression darkened. It's not a festival. And showing up out of the blue will only trouble your maternal family. It is a festival next month, the Dragon Boat Festival. We can surprise them early. Wouldn't that be nice? Mother's face turned even grimmer. You're being so headstrong. Acting on a whim. Father, however, said, I think Alara's idea is good. Your parents often mention missing Alara in letters. If she wants to go, let her. No. During the Dragon Boat Festival, the Empress Dowager will grant medicinal baths, and all officials will attend. It would be improper to miss it. Mother insisted. Your mother is right. Then we return before the festival. The capital to the old capital takes only 2 days. A few days there. And we'll be back in time. Father reasoned. After persuading Mother together, she finally relented. Fine, cutting's a so right sigh. But I'm still recovering from my recent cold, so I won't come. You must convey my regards to your grandparents. She reminded me firmly. Be sure to return before the Dragon Boat Festival. After 2 days by river, we finally arrived at my maternal family's home. Grandmother embraced me tightly, calling me her darling little treasure. You were just a little chubby baby when you left the capital, and now you've grown into a young lady. 13 years had passed, a short distance, yet I had never seen her even once. You have the same delicate looks as your mother did. When I first saw you, I almost thought it was Morgana herself returning. Learning that mother was ill and couldn't come, grandmother's eyes clouded with disappointment. Not wanting her to be upset at her age, I made jokes to lift her spirits. When the topic of my marriage arose, I recounted the Theodore family's proposal as a jest. Her expression, however, darkened slightly. The Theodore family? I didn't expect your mother to remain so obsessed after all these years. Perhaps out of respect for me as a junior, she refused to criticize mother openly. No matter how much I pressed, she revealed nothing further. Grandmother wouldn't speak, but things fulfilled my obsession. But one person would the eldest aunt by marriage. Whenever grandmother mentioned my mother, the aunt's face would reveal contempt, disdain, let out a low sigh, even disgust. After several days, my bond with her had strengthened and considerably. That day, I approached my eldest aunt directly, bluntly asking for her help. I recounted how mother had repeatedly set traps to force me into marrying the Theodore family, and her anger flared. Truly insane. To scheme against your own daughter, but only Morgana could pull such a stunt. The eldest aunt smirked, recounting past events. At that time, my maternal family still lived in the capital. A young general from the Theodore family, gallant and imposing, had captivated countless young women in the city, including my mother. She tried every means to approach Theodore, but he was focused solely on achieving fame and merit, uninterested in romance, and rejected her advances. Later, Theodore went off to the frontier and was killed in battle. He never returned. Your mother was heartbroken, and she even insisted on going to the Theodore family as a widow to mourn him. At this, my aunt's eyes couldn't hide her scorn and hatred. She completely disregarded the Morgana family's reputation and the future of its younger generations. Dressed in red with her dowry, carrying Theodore's ancestral tablet, she was determined to marry into the Theodore family. Fortunately, hadn't fulfilled me. Your maternal grandfather and uncles discovered her plan in time. They stopped her and locked her in the back courtyard. It wasn't until she turned 18 that your grandfather arranged a fine match, your father finally allowing her to marry out, putting the family's mind at ease. I frowned in confusion. But didn't the second uncle of the Theodore family explicitly refuse mother before he left for the campaign? How could she still claim Woodwood and even intend to marry into the Theodore family? Didn't they object? My aunt's disdain deepened. Do you think the Theodore family were any better? After Theodore died, they spread rumors to those young ladies who had once shown interest in him, claiming Theodore had preferred them. But the brutality of war forced him to refuse, sparing them the burden. Shameless. The man was dead. Yet they tried to exploit his reputation to forge alliances with noble families and secure their own status. Surely no one would believe such lies? I said, immediately regretting it. As expected. My aunt sneered. Exactly. Who in their right mind would believe it? But your mother, she believed it. Foolishly thinking Theodore had true feelings for her. She couldn't betray that sentiment and insisted on marrying into the Theodore family, determined to mourn him for life. Perhaps she resented us for preventing her from going to the Theodore family. Over the years, not a single letter came, let alone a visit. Your father, however, showed concern, visiting a few times and helping the children and younger family members with their exams in the capital. I was momentarily at a loss for words. My aunt patted my hand sympathetically. Don't worry. Stay here and leave your marriage to your grandmother. I doubt the Morgana family can overturn her decision. I smiled bitterly. I couldn't linger, there were more pressing matters awaiting me back home. My aunt led me to a courtyard. This was specially kept by your grandmother for your mother. The furnishings and layout are exactly as they were in her home in the capital before she married. Your grandmother couldn't bear to discard any of the furniture your mother used, so she brought it all here. It's a shame your grandmother's thoughtfulness was in vain. My aunt sighed. I entered the room. It was clean, bright, and clearly well maintained. The decor was elegant, with many objects reflecting a young girl's sensibilities. As I looked around, I noticed many pieces resembled my own room. The jade begonia was outdated, yet my mother insisted I place it on the dressing table. The dressing table itself, though I preferred rosewood, she forced me to use yellow heartwood. Even the patterns on the canopy for the bed were identical. I approached the bed, feeling along the headboard, and found a hidden compartment. Inside were various ornaments and paintings. I unwrapped one scroll, bound in red silk. It depicted a young man, dignified and radiant, clad in silver armor, holding a lance while seated atop a magnificent horse. His presence was commanding, yet his face bore an uncanny resemblance to Theodore. I understood then. No wonder. When I married Theodore, my mother's eyes shimmered with tears, as if she were seeing someone else through us. No wonder she raged when I bore confidence for Theodore, wishing for me and him to remain eternally united. I finally recalled her words, "All my efforts to remove obstacles for you wasted." Before the Dragon Bow Festival, I hurried back to the capital. Upon seeing me, my mother exhaled in relief and disgust with my father, which Bafish to visit. "Let's go to the pool near Shilin Slope. It's midway up the mountain, with elegant scenery," my father suggested. Mother shook her head. "Too far. It's just a formality anyway. Better somewhere closer. Dom's courtyard seems convenient." Father frowned. "But how can Dom's courtyard compare to Shilin Slope? There are no rank restrictions for visitors. The crowd is unpredictable. You and Alara might be inconvenienced." Mother insisted. I said, "Let's follow Mother's plan. We only need to check in." "Who's really going to soak in the medicinal bath?" Father looked displeased. "I actually wanted to bathe. The royal bath only opens once a year. You two don't know how to enjoy yourselves." On that day, my mother and I accompanied him early. Mother suggested he bathe while she and I strolled about. Dom's courtyard bathish was simple but spacious, with over 40 pools. Many officials and families merely checked in, walked around, and used the herb-infused warm water to cleanse their hands and faces, considered enough to soak, without enduring the full treatment. "Alara, it seems quieter ahead. Let's go there and wring out our handkerchiefs," Mother said, leading me deeper into the bathish, pointing to a pool partially hidden by trees. "It does look secluded." I nodded, about to move forward, when Mother suddenly cried out, My purse is missing. Must have dropped it along the way." "Alara, you go ahead. I'll find it and join you." With guards present and maids accompanying us, nothing untoward would happen. I smiled and agreed. At the pool, a maid said, "Miss, there are refreshments on the table over there. Let's grab some and join you." I nodded. "Good. Go quickly and return swiftly." Once they left, I gave a subtle signal to an older attendant nearby. She swiftly incapacitated the maid left beside me, dragging her behind a large tree, where I hid as well. The attendant retrieved a bundle from her chest, picked up a large stone, roughly tied it together with the package, and hurled it into the pool. The steamy water made it impossible to tell what had fallen with a single splash. Another splash followed, and a smile tugged at my lips. Before long, Mother strolled over leisurely. Seeing me still standing safely by the pool, she looked surprised, glancing around for the maid who had been knocked unconscious. "Shiogon?" she asked. "She fainted from the steam. I had someone take her to the back to rest," I replied. Mother's face darkened and with anger as she looked toward the pool. A gust of wind swept away the rising steam, and she froze. "There's someone in the pool." She panicked. "Quick, let go. Someone save him. Hurry." I stood to the side, smiling faintly as I watched her cry for help. The person pulled from the water was Theodore. Somehow, he had fallen unconscious in the pool. Along with him, a few silk towels and bathrobes floated up. Because he had remained submerged too long and inhaled a large amount of the medicinal powders in the hot spring, his heart and lungs were damaged. He was essentially left a wreck. Mother was deeply shaken and actually fell ill. When I went to see her, she grabbed my hand. "Alara, Theodore is like this. He may never marry. It's so pitiful." You've always had a kind heart. Will you marry him for me? I pulled my hand away calmly. He brought this on himself. If he hadn't lingered by the pool with ill intentions, none of this would have happened. Mother's eyes widened. You knew all along? Earlier, they had poured an excessive amount of calamus powder into the pool, mixed with the sulfur in the hot spring. Anyone inhaling it would quickly become drowsy. If I had accidentally fallen into the pool at that moment, Theodore would have jumped in to save me. The physicians would have concluded that my discomfort came from overindulging in the medicinal bath. Had no one rescued me in time, my life would have been at risk. With the death of life and the intimacy of being rescued from the water, it would have been almost impossible for me not to marry Theodore. This was exactly what Mother and Theodore's mother had schemed that day. My task was merely to turn their plan back on them. The bundle that fell into the water contained not only excessive calamus but also surplus sulfur powder. When it hit the water, Theodore assumed it was me and, as planned, jumped in to save me. Within moments, he too fainted in the water. The spring's current dispersed the medicinal powder, and when he was rescued, the world assumed it was merely a bath mishap. I had simply used their scheme against them. You're heartless. Mother gritted her teeth, pointing at me. Could I ever match you? I said calmly. Sylvia's flooding. The Boeotian bandits, weren't those all you're doing? You had Beatrice bring the Lee or a family lady to the banquet, bribed Mabel to secretly sprinkle charcoal powder and trigger the flood, and lured Leora into the study. Xiaogan was your agent too, deliberately delaying me in the corner so I'd lose time escaping. Luckily, I was fortunate. I even survived being struck by a beam. Mother shook her head. I didn't expect the beam to fall. Alara, I never meant to harm you. I only wanted what was best for you. I just wanted you to marry into the Theodore family smoothly. It's you who wanted to marry into the Theodore family. I cut her off mercilessly. You've always been obsessed with Theodore. Not me. I wish the entire Theodore family would perish. You knew everything. For a moment, Mother collapsed in despair. Then her eyes lit up again. Alara, you are your mother's good daughter. I beg you to marry Theodore. Consider it fulfilling my long-cherished wish, erasing the regret of my youth. Won't you? I shook my head. Theodore is finished. To repay your care and all you've done, I will tell Father that your spirit was damaged in the previous flood and you need rest at the estate. I had already hinted to Father before. Mother had seemed unwell, her mind wandering, her actions disorderly. He would watch her closely. You'll tell Father? Mother's eyes darkened. I advise against troubling him. His health isn't what it used to be. You mean the food incompatibility recipes Mabel gave you? I asked, my hatred surging. Father had been the most innocent party in all this. His only mistake had been marrying Mother, a lunatic who had caused his early death in the previous life. Mother completely lost control and lunged at me. Alara, you are my daughter. You've allied with them. It's because of them I couldn't marry into the Theodore family. I stepped back, calling for the servants. Hurry. Fetch a physician. Mother seems to be having another episode. The foreign medicine she had been given was potent. Just a few doses in her tea left her partially delirious, and detectable even by the physician. I persuaded Father that the capital's busy, gossipy environment wasn't suitable for her recovery. She should recuperate at the estate near the temple and return once well. Though saddened, Father agreed and sent Mother to a villa close to the temple. A year later, she fell ill again, accidentally knocking over a candle and burning herself to death. Father and I grieved deeply. Life went on. Father asked my maternal family in the old capital to find suitable suitors for me. The old capital was home to many old aristocratic families, with plenty of accomplished young men. Some time later, a disaster struck the Theodore family. A concubine surnamed Zhu, unable to endure her in-laws' abuse, poisoned the household's food, killing many. Theodore survived only because his diet differed. Witnessing his family's demise, he coughed blood and muttered, "No. This isn't right." My household was harmonious. Wives and concubines in abundance. Children everywhere. Leora, you poisoner. You deserve to die. Not me. I no longer cared. grandmother and my eldest aunt brought a few illustrated lists of potential husbands for me to choose from. Which gave me a headache, Sylvia wrote, describing the customs of the western regions, and invited me to visit. I was intrigued and wrote back, asking if there were chickens to eat there. Father's health had stabilized. Hearing that the Minister of Personnel had retired, father was now the top candidate for succession. Life was finally looking promising. Morgana Extra. In one moment, I was being scorched by the fire. The next, I was reborn at 18. Father and the others intended to marry me to the Alara family's heir. How could the Alara heir ever deserve me? In this world, besides Erlang, no one is worthy of marrying me. In my previous life, I was forced into a marriage with Julian, whom I never loved. After giving birth to my daughter, I refused to share a bed with him. Luckily, having so fieldly obsession, my daughter was obedient and increasingly resembled me. Like looking at a younger version of myself. At the plum viewing gathering, I saw Theodore, Erlang's nephew. He resembled Erlang so much that I resolved then and there that my daughter would marry him. It felt as though, in marrying her to him, I was marrying Erlang all over again. But my daughter, just like her father, was infuriatingly obstinate. I had orchestrated everything. Yet she refused to obediently marry Theodore. In the end, she even colluded with her father to have me sent to the estate. Heaven has eyes, I was reborn. I would never marry Julian again. Nor bear another unfilial daughter. Alara, you thought you were clever, didn't you? This life. I will make sure you never come into this world. Under the cover of night, I donned a red wedding gown and scaled the wall, running madly. This time, I would marry into the Theodore family and mourn for Erlang as a devoted widow. With the memory of my past life, I avoided every blocked route and finally reached the Theodore household. Though the family was surprised, they said nothing and soon accepted me. From that moment, I became a Theodore family woman. And I was overjoyed. I vowed to honor Erlang's parents and care for his family with all my heart. The Theodore household was strict. Each day, Hezekiah, I had to attend to my mother-in-law from dawn, helping her dress and wash, only returning to my own quarters late at night. I accepted this. Enduring all hardships the family imposed, I was there to repay a debt. This was my due. The world praised my righteousness. And even the Theodore family proposed petitioning the court to grant me a chastity arch. My parents could do nothing to stop me. And to ease my life in the Theodore household, they helped several Theodore nephews. Harmony between the families prevailed, and at last, I felt I had done right by Erlang. By the 4th year of my marriage, my parents moved to the old capital. Before leaving, Mother worried about me and urged me to go with them. What a joke. In life, I belonged to the Theodore family. In death, I would be a ghost of the Theodore house. After my family moved, my in-laws became even stricter. In the height of summer, my mother-in-law complained of mosquitoes but detested the smell of incense. She said lowering the mosquito net was stifling. So I had to stay beside her bed all night, driving the pests away. My father-in-law wanted a bowl of chilled mung bean soup after lunch to cool off, but his age prevented him from drinking it too cold. The soup needed just a thin layer of ice to melt on the journey from the ice cellar. I had to stand shivering in the cellar, waiting for it to freeze slightly before carrying it under the scorching sun for him to enjoy. Once or twice was bearable, but daily? I grew exhausted. When I pleaded with my mother-in-law, she scolded me for being unfilial, claiming I was unworthy as a Theodore wife and threatened to have me dismissed. I was terrified, quickly apologizing, but a seed of regret had taken root. In the years I married Julian, I had lived in comfort, never stepping into the kitchen or handling a needle. Now, my in-laws pushed their cruelty further, devising endless ways to torment me, while the servants looked down on me. Even my favorite nephew, Theodore, struck me. How could this happen? The Theodore family was known for loyalty and valor. I understood their stern traditions. Yet I could not comprehend why they treated me so harshly. Had I truly done wrong? As their abuse grew, I began to regret everything. I secretly visited the Alara household and saw that Julian had married a graceful, virtuous wife, with a daughter whose demeanor mirrored Alara's. though the likeness in appearance was less striking. Because I had fled the house. I returned to the Theodore family only to be brutally beaten. My anger flared. I demanded to know why. Coming from a prominent family myself, I was subjected to such torment. My eldest sister-in-law sneered. Didn't you come of your own accord? Who forced you? Fearing I might appeal to my old family, the Theodore household even locked me in the wood store, feeding me only leftovers. Outsiders assumed I was a virtuous widow of Theodore, secluded yet praised for my chastity, inadvertently enhancing the family's reputation. One day, disheveled and filthy, I seized an opportunity when the servants forgot to lock the door. I pawned my only bracelet for silver and bought a packet of rat poison. Before the Theodore family noticed, I sneaked into the kitchen and laced a pot of porridge with the poison. But to my fury, it failed to kill them. They discovered my attempt and beat me nearly to death. As I lay on the brink of death, I glimpsed flames once more. If I could choose, I would never return to that past again. Let me die in that fire. The end. The kidnapper's call came again, the nightmare that had haunted me through 2 lifetimes. Your father and your husband, choose one. You have 10 minutes. I looked at my own face in the mirror, young, composed, unreadable. I smiled. In the last life I chose my husband, the man who swore he loved me, and he turned and sold me into the mountains to reclaim his first love's freedom. In the life before that I chose my father, the blood that was supposed to protect me, and he, for the sake of the family's interests, handed me over to another monster's bed. Familial love? Romantic love? They were just the dried hairs and spilled blood of my previous incarnations. I picked up the phone and spoke evenly. No need to choose. Tear up the ransom note. Don't keep either of them. By the way, I added, tell them the one who killed them was me. This time, this life I would open the curtain with the price of their 2 deaths. 3 hours after the call, sirens screamed up the driveway toward the villa. I finished the last sip of my milk with deliberate calm, slipped into a plain white dress, and opened the door. Outside the entrance, the police, my mother-in-law, and my stepmother had turned the place into a human barricade. Morel's eyes went red the instant she saw me. Like a madwoman she lunged forward, raising her hand to slap me. Lythara! You curse on our house. Where is my son? Where is Calfar? I tilted aside and her hand met only air. Momentum made her stagger. Corwin, my stepmother, steadied her. Corwin's eyes were rimmed with tears too, but there was a calculating edge Morel didn't have. Lythara, don't blame your mother-in-law for being anxious. Your father, he and your husband were kidnapped together. How can you be so calm? She spoke for the police to hear, implying that as a daughter and a wife I was unnaturally cold. I ignored her and let my gaze pass over them to the lead detective. Officer, I'm Lythara. I'm the one who called in the report. My composure caught even the seas and detective off guard. Morel went berserk. A report? What report? Did you collude with the kidnappers to kill Calfar? Mother. I spoke for the first time. My voice was low, but it cut through her shrieks. Please, aren't you curious why my father would be kidnapped together with Calfar? Calfar my dead. Foolish husband. Thalion my dead. Foolish father. Morel froze. Corwin's face shifted too. A faint smile touched my lips. Yesterday my father told me he planned to transfer the land on the east side of town, the plot worth 300 million, into Calfar's name as our first wedding anniversary gift. And today, they were abducted together. No sooner had I finished than Morel and Corwin's expressions changed. The venom in their looks toward me receded. The looks they exchanged with one another grew prickly with suspicion. 300 million worth of land, enough to make anyone risk everything. The Thalion clans suspected the Calfar family of using them and then disposing of them. The Calfar family suspected Thalion of staging the whole thing. A dog-eat-dog spectacle was ready to ignite on its own. I didn't need to pour any fuel. The detective, watching the strange charge in the air, frowned. Lythara, please tell us exactly what happened. I nodded and recited the story I'd already prepared. I told them I'd received the kidnapper's call, that I'd been in a panic and could only remember a demand for 1 billion, everything else was a blur. Why so calm? Because I was stunned into numbness. A perfect picture of a frightened, overwhelmed woman. No one would suspect. Only I knew I was waiting for news from the kidnappers. Or rather, waiting for their corpses. The bodies were found the next day. In an abandoned, half-finished building on the outskirts of town. The police strung a long cordon. I was held back outside it. Morel sobbed as if the heavens were falling. She fainted on the spot and was carried away to an ambulance. Corwin's face had gone ashen and she rocked on her feet, but her eyes kept flicking toward the cordoned area. I knew what she was looking for. She was confirming whether Thalion was truly dead. When the coroner peeled back the corner of the white sheet, I saw Kelfar's face, eyes still open. Forever unseeing. He would never understand why the woman who loved him to the bone would make such a choice. How ridiculous. His love was as cheap and vicious as he was. When the police took my statement and asked if I'd made enemies recently, I considered and then answered plainly, yes. My husband Kelfar has a darling on the side named Silva. For her, Kelfar would throw away his life. My father Thalion would sell anything for profit, including his own daughter. Officer, would you say that makes me an enemy to anyone? The detective was left speechless and noted it down. News spread fast. The Kelfar and Thalion families held joint funerals the same day. I stood before the altar in a black mourning dress. Guests flowed past me with looks that mixed pity, sympathy, hadn't fulfilled my obsession, and a faint, curious probing. I paid them no heed. Until a woman in a white dress appeared at the doorway of the mourning hall, her belly subtly rounded. Silva. Kelfar's first love. The little mole at his lip. She walked straight up to Kelfar's portrait as if she had seen no one else. Tears streaming down her face. Kelfar. I'm here. I brought our baby to see you. The hall erupted into a shocked hush. Morel, propped up by relatives, shot upright and stared at Silva's stomach. The dullness in her eyes burst into a savage light. Corwin's face went iron gray. The real show was only beginning. Juan Silva's arrival was like dumping a bucket of cold oil into a boiling pot. The whole mourning hall exploded. Kelfar's relatives swarmed her, chattering about the child. The Thalion kin watched with cold, gleeful detachment. Morel, helped along, pushed forward and fixed her gaze on Silva's belly. Is it true? Is it really Kelfar's child? Her voice trembled. Silva glanced timidly at my face, which betrayed nothing, then nodded firmly. Yes, I saw. Aunt. I'm 3 months along. My grandson. My own grandson. Morel clutched Silva like a drowning woman seizing a straw and wept torrents of grateful tears. Then she suddenly turned on me, her eyes full of malice. Lythara. You barren hen. What did the Kelfar family ever do to you? You've been married a year with no sign of a child. And now you've killed my son. Get out. The Kelfar family doesn't want you. She ranted and pointed at my nose until she was hoarse. I didn't move. I even took another step forward and stood beside Silva. I reached out and gently laid my hand on the belly she was protecting. Silva stiffened. I looked at her and smiled, a smile both tender and mournful. Silva. Thank you. Silva froze. Thank me for what? Thank you for carrying Kelfar's child. My voice caught. Kelfar's greatest wish in life was to have a child. Now you've helped him achieve that. You've done a great service to the Kelfar family. I turned to Morel. My eyes were wet. Mother. Please don't blame me. Kelfar and I wanted children. But my body. I failed him. Now Silva carries Kelfar's blood, she's the continuation of our line. We must thank her properly, bring her into the family, and see that she has a safe pregnancy. My magnanimity stunned everyone into silence. Morel's anger was doused by my saintly words. She glanced at me suspiciously, then at the pitiable Silva. Silva hadn't expected this reaction either. She looked at me, bewildered. Only I knew the truth behind my words. I was flattering her to death. I would elevate her into the family's benefactor, the only hope of the Kelfar lineage. That was the only way she could legitimately move into the Kelfar home, and only then could she bleed Morel dry. A greedy mistress and a grandmother gone mad for heirs. Put them together and the days to come would be more dramatic than any soap opera. And me? I was Kelfar's lawful wife. As long as I did not divorce him, I would remain mistress of the Kelfar household. No one could drive me out. After the funeral, Silva naturally moved into the marital chamber Calfar and I had shared. Under the pretense of protecting her pregnancy, Morel doted on her like a precious jewel, 3 meals a day of tonic soups, fussing over her every step as if to carry her herself. Meanwhile, I, the legitimate wife, became invisible in my own home. They seemed to have forgotten I existed. I didn't mind the quiet. That peace lasted until the lawyer arrived to read Calfar's and Thelian's wills. The small living room was packed. Me, Corwin, Morel, and Silva, who had been singled out for special attention. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the documents. According to Mr. Calfar's will, all assets under his name, real estate, stocks, and cash shall be inherited by his father Prescott deceased and his mother Morel. His spouse, Lythara, shall have no inheritance rights. My heart felt nothing. I had been excluded like this in my previous life too. Morel's face lit with the inevitable smugness of victory. Next came Thalian's will. According to Mr. Thalian's will, all assets under his name shall be inherited by his daughter Lythara. However, there is an additional condition. The lawyer paused and looked at me. Ms. Lythara must, within 1 year of Mr. Thalian's death, bear a son for the Thalian family to continue the line. If she fails to do so, all assets will automatically transfer into the Thalian family trust, to be managed by his brother, Thalian. At those words, Corwin's face drained of color. Thalian is Thalian's own brother, and Corwin's mortal enemy. Thalian had played his hand brilliantly. He knew I could not have children. So he wrote the will to leave everything to his brother, kicking both Corwin and me out. What a considerate father, even dead. He still schemed against me. Morel sneered with glee. Oh my. What will you do now? 1 year to produce a son, Lythara. Are you even capable? Silva stroked her belly at the opportune moment, wearing an expression of bliss and triumph. I ignored their taunts and calmly asked the lawyer. I understand. May I ask how much their combined assets amount to? The number he gave was staggering. But I knew that was only what was visible. They had hidden far more than that. Those hidden funds were my real target. The game was only just beginning. The day after the will was read, Silva came straight to me, her belly prominent. She stood at my door with that lofty air of entitlement. Lythara, did you hear? Calfar's assets have nothing to do with you. I carry Calfar's line now. I'm the rightful heroine of the Calfar family. There's simply no need for you to stay in this house. She was literally ordering me to leave. I sat on the sofa, sipping my tea with languid disinterest, not even bothering to lift an eyelid. All finished? I asked. Silva choked, her face blooming scarlet. How dare you? I'm informing you. Informing me? I set down my cup and finally looked at her. Silva, have you forgotten? I am Calfar's lawful wife on paper. I own half this villa. As long as I don't want to leave, no one can force me out. You, Silva trembled with fury. Don't be shameless. You can't have children and you're pretending to be the wife. You sit here useless and won't let others have a chance. I never said you couldn't have a child. I pretended innocence. On the contrary, I should thank you for continuing the Calfar line. I stood and walked to her, lowering my voice until only she and I could hear. But, Silva, do you really think Calfar truly wanted the child in your belly? Silva's pupils contracted. The smile at the corner of my mouth deepened. He told me himself that women like you are only ever useful as stepping stones for his rise. Once you bore a son, he'd give you a sum of money and send you away never to show your face again. And he said if the child were a girl, he wouldn't even bother with the money. Silva's color drained from her face in an instant. Her lips quivered, and she could not form a single word. No. That's impossible. Calfar loves me. He loves me most. Does he? I took a small voice recorder from my pocket and pressed play. That Silva woman is an idiot. Give her a little sweetness and she'll fall for it. Once she bears a son, I'll be able to control the Calfar family completely. Then I'll deal with her. Someone unfit for society. And she actually thinks she can become Lady Calfar? Silva swayed, bracing herself on the doorframe to stay upright. I turned off the recorder and looked at her ashen face, smiling with an almost tender gentleness. Now, Do you still want me to leave? Silva left like a soul torn from its body. I knew that recorder had already become a thorn lodged deep in her heart. She would no longer believe Morel, nor naively imagine she could secure her place through bearing a child. She would start planning for herself. That was enough. The next few days, the house was unnaturally quiet. Morale still hovered around Silva, but Silva's manner had grown noticeably colder. A subtle tension had begun to stretch between them. I, meanwhile, began racing the assets Thalion and Kalfar had hidden away. From my past life, I knew they shared a secret account in a Swiss bank. The password was a labyrinth of numbers and letters. Last time, it had taken me 10 years to crack it. By then, the money had already been carved up by the Kalfar and Thalion clans. This time, I would give them no such chance. I found Thalion's private assistant, Uncle Chen. He had followed Thalion for 20 years, loyal, discreet, and keeper of his deepest secrets. I arranged to meet him at a CAF. He looked even more haggard than at the funeral, streaks of grey at his temples. My lady, my condolences. He sighed when he saw me. I went straight to the point. Uncle Chen, did my father leave anything special for me? He blinked, then slowly shook his head. The chairman passed so suddenly. He had no time to leave instructions. Really? I held his gaze. Uncle Chen, you've served my father for 20 years. You've earned your place. Now he's gone. And Thalion's property is about to be swallowed by that jackal calling himself family. Do you really think he'd lead you a way out? Color flickered across his face. My father never trusted anyone. He must have kept a secret ledger of all his assets and dealings. Didn't he? Uncle Chen fell silent. I pushed a cup of coffee toward him. Uncle Chen, I'm not begging. I'm offering you a chance. Help me, and you help yourself. Otherwise, once Thalion takes control, the first man he'll purge is you. He wrestled with himself for a long moment before finally pulling a black USB drive from his briefcase. The chairman did keep a ledger and encrypted digital file. He said if anything ever happened to him, this was to go to you. He slid the drive across to me. The password is your birthday and your mother's death date. My mother, the woman who died giving birth to me. The only woman Thalion had ever truly loved. I picked up the USB. My fingertips were ice. Thank you, Uncle Chen. Take care, my lady. He rose, back bowed, and left the CAF. I knew I had just seized my most powerful weapon. Morel somehow caught wind of Kalfar's overseas assets, and began hounding me for the so-called key. Her relationship with Silva completely collapsed. Silva must have told her about the recording. The two of them had a screaming match in the villa. Morel called Silva a curse who had failed to save her son and now schemed for the family fortune. Silva snapped back, calling Kalfar a fraud and the Kalfar clan a nest of vipers. The house became a daily battleground. Then, one midnight, Morel burst into my room. Her hair was wild. Her eyes bloodshot, she looked deranged. Lithe Ara. Hand over whatever Kalfar left behind. I know you took it. I sat on the bed, watching her coolly. I don't know what you're talking about. You're still pretending. She lunged for the bag at my bedside. I slipped easily out of reach. She fell flat on the floor but clawed herself up again, still intent on charging at me. Just then, the villa's front door was kicked open from the outside. Several men in black suits swept in, encircling a middle-aged man who carried an aura like a blade drawn from its sheath. He looked to be about 50. His features faintly resembling Kalfar's but his eyes far sharper, colder. He didn't so much as glance at Morel sprawled on the floor. His hawk-like gaze went straight to me. Morel saw him and scrambled to him as though to a savior, clutching at his leg. Brother! Thank heavens you're here. This whore is trying to steal our family's money. Brother? A chill dropped into my stomach. Prescott, Kalfar's father, was an only son. What brother could she mean? The man kicked Morel aside and strode toward me. His presence was so oppressive the very air seemed to harden. Looking down on me, he curved his mouth into a cold smile. So you're Lithara? His voice was hoarse, edged with a predator's knowledge. I hear you're the one who told the kidnappers to kill. My heart slammed to a stop. How could he possibly know? No one but me and the dead kidnappers could have known. Before I could move, two of the men in black stepped forward and seized my arms. He leaned close, murder naked in his eyes. Little girl. You're bold. Daring to touch our clan. Tell me where it is. Otherwise I'll make you wish for death and be denied it. I stared back at him. My gaze like ice. I don't know what you're talking about. I only know you've broken into my home and are illegally detaining me. I can call the police. Call the police? The man barked out a laugh, as though I'd just told him the sky was green. He released me, hadn't fulfilled session. Stepped back, straightened his suit. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Marin Prescott's cousin. Kael'thar's uncle. Marin. The name flickered from my past life, a shadow of the Kael'thar family. A man truly ruthless. Compared to him, Kael'thar had been nothing but a ridiculous clown. My useless nephew and Kellyan caught they'd stage a little damsel in distress drama to test your loyalty. And it all went wrong. Marin spoke with an eerie calm, as if discussing someone else's misfortune. But inside me, the storm rose. So that kidnapping had been a farce from the start. A trap set by the father I'd trusted most and the husband I'd loved most. To test me. If I chose Kael'thar, Thalion would be utterly disappointed in me and throw me away like a spare pawn. If I chose Thalion, Kael'thar would have proof that I didn't love him, divorce me with righteous cause, and take Silva as his wife. No matter which way I turned, I lost. They had plotted everything so carefully. What they failed to calculate was that the actors they hired were true desperados. They never guessed I would choose to tear up the script. One sentence from me keep neither of them turned their meticulously staged farce into reality. So the kidnappers were real. And the killing was real. Marin stared at me as if trying to peer into my soul. You killed them yourself. Morel, standing nearby, lost her mind at those words. You. Of course it was you. You poisonous woman. You killed my son. She screamed and lunged at me. Only to be held back by Marin's men. Marin waved his hand in annoyance. Shut them up and drag her out. Morel's cries were smothered. She was hauled away like a dead dog. The living room emptied until only Marin and his men remained with me. Now we can talk properly. Marin sat back on the sofa and crossed one leg. Where's the money? The stash they hid, where is it? He hadn't come for vengeance. He'd come for money. I understood then. Marin's overseas ventures must have been collapsing. He needed this cash to plug the holes. Kael'thar's death was an opportunity for him. Why should I tell you? I sneered. Because I'd like you to live. Marin dabbed his fingers against the armrest. You're clever and you're ruthless. I like to work with people like that. Hand over the money and I'll guarantee you a comfortable life for the rest of your days. No one from the Kael'thar or Thalion families will dare to lift a finger against you. I looked at him and suddenly smiled. All right. I'll cooperate. Marin raised an eyebrow, surprised at my promptness. However, I have one condition. I fixed my gaze on him. I want Silva and the child in her womb gone from this world. Completely. Marin's eyes took on a playful glint. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Deal. I pretended to strike a bargain with Marin. He needed the intel in my head. I needed his blade to clear my path. We understood each other, a mutual, tacit exchange. Marin's men withdrew from the villa for the time being, but I could feel their watchful eyes in every corner. I handed him the USB drive I'd taken from Uncle Chen. Of course. It was a copy. And of course, I'd tampered with the accounts masking the most critical overseas holdings. Overjoyed, Marin handed the drive to his best hackers and set them to work, while his attention was swallowed by ledgers. I set my own plan in motion. First I saw Corwin. After Thalion's death she had become skittish, terrified of being swept out by the Thalion clan. I told her I was willing to relinquish my claim to the Thalion inheritance on one condition. She must transfer every scattered Thalion share she held to me. Corwin was ecstatic. To her, those scattered shares didn't add up to even 5%, a trivial amount. What I offered up, however, was the control of the Thalion family itself. She signed without hesitation. She didn't know that Thalion had long ago funneled core assets through elaborate means into those seemingly insignificant scattered companies. What she signed was not a mere transfer of shares. It was a sellout. With Corwin dealt with. My next target was Silva. Marin had promised to handle her. But I didn't trust him. I had to act myself. I arranged to meet Sylvie outside. She came wary and full of hatred because I had told her I was delivering Kael'thar's bequest. In a private room at a CAF I slid an envelope across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Guarded. Kael'thar left you and the child a trust fund. 50 million. I said it without flinching. "And a plane ticket out of the country." Silva froze. She opened the envelope and, seeing the documents, began to breathe faster. 50 million. Enough to secure her and the child for the rest of their lives. "He really left me money?" Her eyes reddened. "He said you were the person he wronged most in life. He wanted you to forget everything here and start anew somewhere no one knew you." I lied with perfect calm. A woman's heart is always vulnerable. Especially when she believes the world has turned its back on her, and a sudden kindness appears that single warmth can topple all defenses. Silva cried. "I knew it. He had a place for me in his heart." I watched her without stirring. "The flight's in 2 days. The money will be wired to your offshore account. Once you leave, don't contact anyone here. Especially no one in the Kael'thar family." "I understand. I understand." Silva wiped her tears clumsily and clutched the envelope to her chest. Seeing her swallow my lie so utterly, I raised my coffee and masked the chill at the corner of my mouth with the gesture of a sip. "Marin. Kael'thar. All you Kael'thar men like to treat women as chess pieces. I would show you how a pawn pushed into a corner can overturn the entire board." On the day Silva left, I accompanied her to the airport. I watched her walk toward the security gate clutching hope, then called a number. "She's on the plane." Act as planned. The voice on the other end belonged to one of Marin's men. He'd been paranoid and had sent people to tail her. The plan was for the plane to vanish over the vast sea by accident. 2 lives gone. Clean and tidy. Marin believed he'd pulled the strings. What he didn't know was I had a contingency. I'd anonymously sent fabricated evidence that Marin had murdered his nephew's wife and unborn heir to seize the estate to several sensationalists for an outlets. Whether Silva lived or died, Marin would be stained. With Silva dealt with, I focused all my energy on the vast inheritance. Marin's hacking team took days to crack the copy of the USB I'd given him. When they saw the huge sums on the ledgers, Marin's eyes lit up, but he quickly discovered some critical accounts were gone. He stormed to me furious. "Where's the money? Where did you move it?" He seized my collar. Face contorted. He pinned me to the wall, and I had trouble breathing. But I smiled. "Marin, did you forget? That money belonged to my father and my husband. I can move it wherever I please. You want to die?" His hand gripped my throat. I felt the air thinning. And my vision was beginning to fade to black. With my last ounce of strength, I pulled a small remote control from my pocket. "Want to guess what happens if I press this?" Marin froze in his movements. "The valuables you've hidden in that Swiss bank vault, along with your transactions with your partners, will be immediately handed over to Interpol." The hand on my neck loosened. Almost unconsciously. How? How do you know about this?" "I know more than you can imagine." I gasped, my lungs burning for air. "Like how I know you're desperate for that money because the South American mine you invested in collapsed. You lost everything and now owe a mountain of debt. If you don't find more money, your friends will tear you apart." These details I pieced together from my memories of the past life. Marin's face drained of color. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm here to collect the debt of your Kael'thar family," I said clearly, meeting his gaze. "Now, let's renegotiate the terms. I can give you the money. But not all of it. I want 51 of the Marin family shares," I continued. "And I want you to personally send Morel to a mental hospital. Let her live the rest of her life in torment, knowing she's lost both her son and her grandson." Marin's eyes burned with rage. His temples throbbed as if he were on the verge of killing me. I knew he wanted to. But he couldn't. Because his life was now in my hands. After a long silence, he ground out a single word through clenched teeth. "Fine. The deal with Marin went smoothly. He was a smart man, knowing exactly when to bow his head. I took control of the Marin family's group, becoming the largest shareholder in this century-old company. Morel was also personally committed to the best psychiatric hospital in the city by Marin himself. I went to visit her once. She was dressed in a hospital gown, sitting on a garden bench with a vacant look in her eyes, endlessly muttering, "My son. My grandson." I stood in front of her. But she didn't react. She had completely lost her mind, living in the nightmare she had spun for herself. This was what I wanted. It was more painful for her than death. Back on the Thalian family's side, Corwin didn't realize he'd been tricked until after he signed the stock transfer papers. The core assets of the Thalian family group were nearly wiped out by me. She and Thalian had fought bitterly over the scraps left behind, becoming the laughingstock of the entire business world. I paid them no more attention. Everything belonging to Thalian was tainted. I didn't even want to touch it. When the dust finally settled, it was early winter. I handed over the management of the Marin family group to a professional team and prepared to leave the city. Just before I left, I received an unexpected package. It was from Uncle Chen. Inside was a diary. My mother's diary. The last page was from the day I was born. In elegant handwriting, she wrote, "My little Lythara. Welcome to this world. I hope you live a life of peace and joy. Never let hatred cloud your eyes." I closed the diary, my eyes stinging with warmth. For the first time into lifetimes, I wanted to cry. Peace and joy. Mother. I'm sorry. Your daughter has disappointed you. My life was always destined to be forever distant from those 4 words. In the end, I never left. Marin's retaliation came faster and more insidiously than I expected. On the surface, he seemed to bow to me. But behind my back, he contacted all the distant relatives of the Kale-Far and Thalian families whose interests I had harmed. They united and launched an attack against me in the boardroom. They accused me, an outsider, of using improper means to seize the company and demanded a new election for the chairman. I became the target of their attacks. The company's stock price fluctuated wildly. Sitting in the chairman's seat, I coldly watched the greedy, ugly faces below me. Lythara. What gives you the right to sit here? That's right. The Kalthar family's business doesn't belong to some outsider like you. Give up your shares and get out of the Marin family. Marin sat across from me, smug and watching with amusement. He thought he had won. I smiled. Uncles, Head and Closel, have you finished? I stood and surveyed the room. You call me an outsider and claim I have no right to govern the Marin family. Well, today, I'll show you whether I have this right. I pressed the button on the projector remote. A document appeared on the big screen. This is the record of all transactions between the Marin family group and South American Hope Mining over the past 10 years. And this so-called Hope Mining is nothing more than a shell company used for money laundering. Over the past decade, 3.7 billion flowed from the Marin family into this company. All this money has, no doubt, ended up in your pockets. The room went deathly silent. Everyone's faces had changed. Marin's was especially dark. His expression one of shock and fury. He hadn't expected me to have such damning evidence. I also have a backup of all your account flows and dividend records. I waved another USB drive in my hand. What do you think would happen if I hand these over to the tax authorities and Securities Commission? You dare? A white-haired old man suddenly slammed his hand on the table, pointing at me. You're threatening us. I'm not threatening. I smiled, my grin growing brighter. I'm just notifying you. From this day forward, the Marin family group is under my control. Anyone who objects can go ahead and turn themselves in. As for you, I turned to Marin. Money laundering, inciting murder, faking a plane crash. Your crimes will keep you in prison for the rest of your life. With that, the doors of the conference room were flung open. A group of uniformed police officers marched in. At the forefront was the old policeman who had taken my statement at the villa. He walked up to Marin, presenting an arrest warrant. Marin, you are suspected of multiple international financial crimes and intentional murder. Please come with us. Marin's face turned ashen. He glared at me. eyes filled with unwillingness and hatred. It's you. It's all your design. Yes, I said, watching as they handcuffed him. My smile was cold, sharp as ice. I told you. I'm here to collect the debt. The debts of the Kalthar family and the Thalian family. I'll make sure to pay them all. One by one. Marin was taken away. The parasites of the Kalthar and Thalian families were also one by one invited in for tea. Every word I spoke was meant for the police to hear. When that message spread, the entire business world of the city shuddered, and Ilwythara overnight became a name that made people pale to hear. Some called me ruthless. A venomous woman who climbed to power over the corpses of her husband and kin. Others called me brilliant. A heroine who turned the tide against overwhelming chaos. I didn't care. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marin Group's stop floor, looking down at the endless flow of cars and lights below. In my previous life, I had jumped from here, ending a life both pitiful and absurd. In this life, I stood here as the new master of this city. It was all over. Those who hated me, those who harmed me, had all met the ends they deserved. And at last, I could set everything down. I drew from the drawer my mother's diary, turned to the last page, and beside the words "May you lie the life of peace and joy," I gently wrote for more. I have tried. From this moment on, my life would hold no hatred. No more schemes. Carrying my mother's hopes and the freedom I had fought for myself, I would live a brand new life that belonged to Lythar alone. This time, no one would ever again be my chain. I was free.